Dark Souls is overrated as heck. Wait, no, hold on a sec. If you don't know what Dark Souls is, you've probably been in a coma for the last 7 years or so, because how could you not know what Dark Souls is, the way that some people religiously worship it? Dark Souls is often praised for its innovativeness and that it was a groundbreaking title for the action role-playing genre and that we'd never really seen anything like it before. You'd swear dodge rolling was only in Dark Souls the way that some people go on about this game. Look, I'm not saying that the Souls series is bad. The games are good. They're good, but I don't think they're as amazing as everyone seems to think they are. And now, From Software has so graciously given us Dark Souls Remastered, or as it should be more fittingly called, Dark Souls Prepare to Buy Edition. So now that Dark Souls is back in the news again and I can make a clickbaity video about it, it's time that we really sat down together and had a look back at this title and everything that makes it, and decide, is it really as good as we seem to think it is? This game is just Monster Hunter but easy. Dodge rolls with invincibility frames? Yeah, pretty sure I'm playing Monster Hunter. Oh, I cut his tail off for an extra drop. Yeah, this is definitely Monster Hunter. For real though, there's a fine line between difficult and unfair. Dark Souls is constantly towing this line. You can say get good all you want, doesn't change the fact that some of the stuff that happens in this game is just straight up unfair, whether RNG patterns or the poor technicalities of how the game works. Getting stun locked and killed while you're helpless on the ground and unable to recover it all? Dark Souls has plenty of that in it. And to be fair, so does Monster Hunter, so my original point is still valid. The camera angle in Dark Souls is honestly what really makes the game hard. Coupled with an annoying targeting system, your vision is often obscured or not really pointing where you need it to be without incredible effort and luck. A big issue in terms of longevity with this game is that once you hit a certain point, the game really starts to feel a little streamlined and simplified, particularly in comparison to the earlier parts of the game. The map becomes less intertwined and there's more backtrack and general confusion. Much like an Australian internet connection, after a few hours it really just starts to drop off. Sure, the earlier parts of the game are meant to capture your interest and whatever, but that doesn't excuse the fact that the later part of the games are just flat out worse and less engaging. That's just poor judgment and development. The way that multiplayer works is weird and stupid. There's no way to just do straight up co-op. You have to summon your friends into your world with some dumbass ritualistic shit. Could they really not have just implemented some kind of, actual multiplayer feature that isn't inconvenient and obscure? I get that perhaps it might not suit the lore or whatever, but it's just dumb. The one that's in place just doesn't work most of the time. You'll try to summon someone, it'll take a minute or two before it just says, nah, it's fucked, mate. Overall, I find that the game can just be rather repetitive between having to do stuff over and over again because you keep dying or whatever. The way you go about progressing and the way you engage in combat doesn't really diversify throughout the game. And yeah, it's an RPG, so I guess it's meant to have some sense of grindiness about it, but it really doesn't help you retain your interest. It just seems to be one of those games where you should probably have the wiki open while you're playing, or have someone who's already beaten the game standing over your shoulder telling you everything you have to do. Unless that person is a Dark Souls elitist. The real issue with Dark Souls is the community and their attitude towards the game itself and other people who play the game. The whole get good culture around the game is just petty and obnoxious. Just because a game is hard doesn't mean it's good. And just because you beat a hard game doesn't mean you're some kind of superior being. Look, I'm not saying that the entire community is terrible, and I'll admit there's been some good stuff that's come from the community, but you can't argue that a lot of the stuff that comes from the fanbase is TM06 toxic. And that, coupled with the fact that the game is already unintuitive, makes it difficult for newcomers to really get immersed in the series. It's almost like some cool kids club where you're not allowed to sit with them at lunch unless you beat the entire game with that broken sword you get at the start. Because if you can't, you're obviously just some kind of animal. Possibly the worst part of Dark Souls Legacy is its disdainful use as a comparison to any video game that is hard, as if to imply that it was the first video game to ever be difficult or something. In all honesty, it's lazy journalism, yes, but this overhyped culture that portrays this game as more or less some kind of physically painful endurance test that you should be praised for playing and completing definitely contributes towards this. So, it's finally here, the $20 patch for the original Dark Souls, which, by the way, has been pulled off the Steam store, so if you wanted to get Dark Souls on PC, you'd best be prepared to buy. And surprisingly, it's somewhat thoroughly underwhelming. As explored earlier, the original Dark Souls has quite a few technical issues that were just completely ignored in this remaster, and instead they just made the world look a bit prettier and can now charge you twice as much for it. Unless of course you already own Dark Souls on Steam, in which case they so graciously give you access to the remaster for half price. But you might as well not bother if you already own the original. Unless the visuals genuinely hurt your eyes, in which case I can't really blame you if they do. It is good, however, to see members of the community actually coming forward and expressing their discontent with the remaster's release. It's good that releases like this aren't just held in some kind of godly regard because of the original game's legacy, which I think is a little overhyped anyway. In reality, the whole Dark Souls remastered thing seems just like a cheeky little cash grab by From Software, but can you blame them? When you've got an audience that so religiously plays your games, you might as well take advantage of that. In the end, Dark Souls almost leaves me at odds with myself. Sometimes when I'm playing this game, I get a real surge of excitement and I want to play on, and then a minute later, it's totally gone, whether to me dying or me getting frustrated with the controls. Sometimes I don't really know how I feel about the game. The game certainly isn't a shambles. There's a really solid lore and setting that isn't just thrown at you by cutscenes and codex entries, and the exploration aspect and map design is really superb for the most part. But when you really examine some of the game mechanics and how the game plays out, I really don't think it's quite the godsend that some people would like to have us believe it is. When you really stand back and take a look at Dark Souls, you have to admit that there's quite a few issues with it on a technical level, and just ignoring them is, well, ignorant. Not to mention the fact that throughout my playthrough of Dark Souls, I did not see a single whooper anywhere, which is just a terrible design choice to be perfectly honest. Look, From Software, I'm not angry. I'm not disappointed either because I didn't really care all that much about the remaster's release and I'm only here for some juicy clickbait views, but I think you get a little more credit than you deserve. When it comes down to it, if you didn't beat Dark Souls or you didn't enjoy playing Dark Souls, that doesn't make you a fake. Beating Dark Souls doesn't make you a better person. Beating Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Explorers of Time, now that makes you a better person. I'm still fucking crying. Jesus Christ.